Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're jumping right into the first 3 months of pregnancy in India. And let me tell you, it's a journey filled with incredible joy, deep tradition, but also some pretty serious challenges. So, how does it all start? Well, for so many people, it begins with that simple question. A missed period, maybe a sudden wave of nausea. You start to wonder, could it be? These first hints can be super subtle, but man, they really kick off a flood of questions and emotions. Okay, so yeah, a missed period is kind of the classic giveaway. But your body is actually sending out a whole bunch of other signals too. You've got these hormones surging, especially progesterone, and that's what can lead to feeling just so tired. Or you might notice breast tenderness and even some pretty big mood swings. And then there's the infamous morning sickness, which, let's be real, can hit you any time of day. Plus, all those weird food cravings or things you suddenly can't stand, these are all super common signs. It's really interesting. In India, there's this very common cultural practice of not telling anyone about the pregnancy for the first 3 months. And it's not just about tradition. There's a solid medical reason behind it. The first trimester is when the risk of miscarriage is highest. So this time becomes this very private, quiet period of just hoping and waiting before you feel ready to share the big news. All right, so you've gotten a positive home test. What's next? The very first thing you should do is schedule that appointment with your doctor. This first checkup is, well, it's probably the most important one. It really sets the stage for the entire pregnancy. And you should expect this first visit to be really thorough. Your doctor's going to ask you about everything, your health, your family's health history, any previous pregnancies. They're trying to get a complete picture. They'll also do a general exam, check your blood pressure and weight, and then recommend some basic tests like blood work. And of course, you'll walk out with some really important advice on what to eat and what supplements you need. Speaking of supplements, one of the absolute first things you'll likely get is a prescription for folic acid. It might just seem like a simple B vitamin, but it's so powerful. It helps protect your baby from really serious birth defects of the brain and spine, things like spina bifida. The standard dose in India is usually 5 mg a day, and doctors even recommend you start taking it before you get pregnant if possible. Another really crucial part of this early stage is the ultrasound. It's often a transvaginal one, and it's considered the gold standard for a bunch of reasons. First, it confirms the pregnancy is actually in the uterus, which is so important to rule out a dangerous ectopic pregnancy. It'll give you the most accurate due date. It can tell you if you're having twins or more, and it can spot any early complications like fibroids or cysts right away. Okay, so we've talked about the personal side of things, the symptoms, the doctor's visits. But now we need to zoom out a bit, because to really understand pregnancy in India, you have to look at the wider context of risk. And it's really important to get this. And here's a stat that might actually shock you. A huge national survey found that nearly half of all pregnancies in India are classified as high risk. Yeah, 49.4%. That means almost 1 in every 2 pregnancies has at least one factor that could lead to complications. So what's causing this? Well, if you look at the breakdown, it's really revealing. The number one factor by a long shot is having babies too close together, less than 18 months apart. After that, a history of miscarriage or stillbirth is a big one, followed by having had a C-section before. It really paints a clear picture of where the biggest challenges lie. And these risks, they aren't just physical. The mental health side of this is a huge deal. Studies in India have found that antenatal depression, that's depression during pregnancy, is incredibly common. Some studies found rates as high as 65%. That just shows the massive psychological weight that many women are carrying. And when you dig into what's behind that, you see that the risk factors aren't just medical. They're deeply social. Things like feeling pressure to have a boy, facing violence from a partner, or just not having enough support. All of these things can have a huge impact on a mom's mental well-being when she's already so vulnerable. Okay, so after talking about all those risks, it might feel a little overwhelming. But here's the good news. One of the most powerful things you can do for a healthy pregnancy is something you have direct control over. And that's your diet. What you eat is absolutely fundamental. The name of the game is a balanced diet. We're talking about whole foods that are packed with the good stuff: folate, iron, protein. So if you're vegetarian, things like dal, paneer, and lots of leafy greens are fantastic. And for non-vegetarians, you can't go wrong with lean proteins like eggs, grilled chicken, and fish. Now, knowing what to eat is one thing, but knowing what not to eat is just as important. You want to stay away from things like raw seafood or unpasteurized dairy products because you want to avoid any nasty foodborne illnesses. And this should go without saying, but it's absolutely critical to avoid alcohol and tobacco completely. They can cause serious, serious harm. All right, so we've covered personal health, but what about the bigger picture? Let's look at these support systems that are in place for expecting mothers in India. And you might be surprised at just how strong they are. Get this. Under the Maternity Benefit Act, women get 26 weeks of paid maternity leave for their first 2 kids. 26 weeks. That's one of the most generous policies in the entire world. It gives new moms that critical time to heal and bond with their baby without having to worry about money. And the law is incredibly thoughtful. It's not just for biological moms. It gives 12 weeks of paid leave to mothers who are adopting a baby. It even has provisions for leave after a miscarriage, which shows a real understanding of the physical and emotional toll that can take. It's really quite comprehensive. So you have this amazing combination of formal legal support and these wonderful cultural safety nets. Beyond the laws, you have traditions like the God Barai, the baby shower, which is all about celebrating the mother-to-be, showering her with blessings and gifts, and just wrapping her in the support of her community. And that really brings us to our final thought. What we see in India is this incredible paradox, right? You have these really strong, supportive laws and beautiful traditions on one hand, and on the other, you have these very real, very deep-seated medical and social risks. So the big question is, what will it take to bridge that gap, to make sure that every single pregnancy in India is not just safe, but truly celebrated? That's the real journey ahead.